Hello and welcome to my YouTube channel. My name is Melissa. I am the owner and artist here at the Top Drawer RVA located in Richmond, Virginia. This dresser is an auction find, which means that I don't see it before I buy it. I can see the photos online and I can kind of see what would be wrong with the piece, but I do not see all of the damage and details until I pick it up. But I could tell in the photos that this old girl had some great bones, as well as all the original hardware. And honestly, I kind of love the surprise factor when purchasing something online and going to see it for the first time. So let's take this beauty apart and see what we can find underneath this dirty old finish. When I went to the shed to bring this beauty in, I noticed that there was something hiding underneath the top two drawers. I could kind of see a finish that I thought was Birdseye maple, but it's really hard to tell, and sometimes that finish is just painted on. After a good clean with white lightning, I could totally tell that this was a veneer, so I grabbed my Surf Prep sander and did a test spot. Then I stopped and did a quick change with my paper to get something a little bit less abrasive because veneer is notoriously thin and you take the chance of blowing through the edges. I could tell that this was possibly Birdseye maple. So what is Birdseye maple and why was I kind of excited to see it on the top two drawers? Well, Birdseye maple is actually a very rare type of wood. It's usually applied to pieces with a veneer-like surface, and when I say veneer, I mean a very thin stripping of wood that's laid over top of a solid wood surface. It has a really cool pattern and it's actually a little bit luminescent. It glows a tiny bit and shimmers and shines. You can really see that happen when I spray the water onto this drawer and you can see the shine from the light. Turns out only the top two drawers on this piece have Birdseye maple and they are not damaged for a change. So that means I will be basing this entire piece around the color and style of this Birdseye maple on the top two drawers. But that puts me in kind of a precarious position because the rest of this dresser is really damaged. And even though I would love to sand down and stain the top to match that beautiful veneer, this is what was sitting on the top of the dresser. Somewhere along the last 100 or so years of this old beautiful dresser's journey, somebody put something on top that kind of leaked down and removed the finish. Along with removing the finish, it created a little bit of a divot, a little bit of a hole underneath the veneer. Now, let me tell you, as an experienced furniture painter, if you think you could just paint right over top of that little hole and nothing would happen because you're covering the actual mark rather than fixing the problem, you would be wrong, because what would happen is water would seep underneath that veneer and it would continue to bubble and that entire veneered top would peel back. So the way that I repair this, and let me tell you, it's probably not the correct way, but it's the way that works for me, is to insert wood glue underneath this damaged finish. Once I insert the wood glue underneath with a syringe, what's going to happen is it's going to fill that negative space, allowing me to put something very heavy on top and seal it up. I can overfill. Yes, the glue will come out a tiny bit around the edges, but I can gently sand that down to flat. Knowing that the hole is filled and the veneer is secure is way more important than having it left the way that it is and having it bubble up. It doesn't seem like a syringe would be a handy tool to have as a furniture painter, but it really is. I keep a couple on hand just for this purpose of fixing bubble veneer. After you have finished filling in the hole with your glue, place something very heavy over top and wait until fully dry before you sand it back to flat. While that gets dry, we're going to move on to the next big problem. Can you see that missing trim? That small little corner has an entire piece of missing trim wood. So I have a couple solutions for fixing this and we're going to walk through them. Start off by removing any of the little nails that might be sticking out and sand back the area to flat. So my thought process was to take my clay, create a mold, fill it with resin, and then fill in the negative space. I mean, it makes sense, right? What could happen? What could go wrong with this amazing little plan? Well, we're going to go over that right now. I feel like I learn something new in this furniture painting journey every day. I don't think anybody knows it all, but you know, we can figure it out as we go along. So I measured the area that needed to be filled, found the exact same trim on the other side with the same length. I mean, I've done this before. Why wouldn't it work this time, right? So I take my clay and I mold the trim for the exact length that I'm going to need for the missing part of the trim. The plan is to then attach the two pieces of clay, making one big mold that I could block off the ends and fill with resin. Makes sense, right? So far, this is going according to plan. This works. I made the mold and flipped it over. Next up, I got my resin. I used this resin that I purchased from Hobby Lobby. Now, this is where we started to go a little bit downhill, because even though I love resin and making molds, I really don't do it very often. So making resin that hardens into a white mold is fairly easy. You take two products, part A, part B, mix them together equal parts in a little cup, and then pour them into your mold. This mold would then cure and harden, and you can pop out your hard piece of resin. Except for this is the part that went downward fast. So part A worked well, but part B side, when I went to pour it in my tiny cup for the same amount, I realized that this was kind of a chunky resin. Yes, resin can expire. Did you know that? Because I did not, and my resin was expired inside the box, which means this is not liquid, which means it cannot mix together in equal parts, and it cannot get hard. But I was already this far in the process, and I was like, I'll give it a go anyways. We will fill this up, mix it together, and see what happens, knowing that it probably wouldn't work, but worth a shot. Now that I have my 2 parts equal resin in the cup, you mix it up for about 30 seconds, and then you pour it in the mold. And it did not cure. It did not cure at all. So plan 2, part B, let's go, find another way, is to move the resin that won't cure out of the way, you can see it right there, and throw it in the garbage. And start with some small sticks that you hopefully can sand down to the exact same size that you need for the missing part of the trim. So these sticks are part of a bag that I had from Hobby Lobby. Hobby Lobby sells small bags of different types of wood trim in the wood section, and this is actually a very soft wood. I think it's like a balsam wood. So I sanded these little sticks until they were the exact same size and curvature of the missing pieces that I needed. Was it fun? No. Did it work? Yes. So now I have 2 small sticks, the exact same size that I need to fit the missing space. I applied my wood glue down, put the sticks down, and then I will use my Dixie Belle's mud to fill in the edges and join them together. This is nowhere near like the proper way or the perfect way to do things, y'all, but this is the way that I do things, which is fly by the seat of my pants. And 9 times out of 10, it works just fine. And actually, at the end product, I couldn't even tell where I added those missing sticks for the missing trim. You also have the option to use a small finishing nail to adhere these, but this part of the drawer isn't anything you'd be grabbing, touching, or pushing. So I think that the wood glue and the mud will be strong enough. I do plan on using bonding boss over top of these as well. I would never do this if I didn't think that it would stick well. Like on the very edge of a drawer, I think I would use finishing nails to adhere my wood to the piece. But for this decor part of the drawer, I think that this process worked out just fine. So I'm going to overfill my edges, and I do this also with missing parts of the veneer. Dixie Belle's mud is water-based, and when you sand it, it's really easy to sand back to the exact shape that you need. So I find overfilling helps me a lot with getting things to be filled in the proper way. If you underfill and then you go and sand your mud, you're going to have to add more, and that's going to just add length to your process of fixing part of the dresser. I then used the same mud to go around all of the missing veneer parts. And let me tell you, there was a lot. There was a lot of missing veneer on this piece, but that's okay. When we sand it back to flat and cover it in emboss, you will never know that all of those damages were there. So what is next in my prep? Well, that would be bonding boss. I like to apply bonding boss with a roller to keep it nice and smooth, as well as cover large surfaces quickly. Bonding boss comes in 3 different colors: clear, white, and gray. I tend to use white and gray the most often. I feel like it's just a little bit easier to cover and see where you missed a spot versus the clear. The clear really is quite clear. It goes on a little milky, but takes a little a little harder of a look to make sure you got all of your spots. So I will also use a throwaway chip brush to fill in the edges and then also dispose of this roller when I am finished. I do not want to wash my Bonding Boss down the drain. In order for Bonding Boss to work the best of its abilities, you need to apply 2 even coats, waiting 2 to 4 hours in between coats of Boss, and then you must wait approximately 24 hours before you begin to paint. This Bonding Boss is going to knock out any stains, tannins, or possible bleed through. It's going to help me match up all of the wood that doesn't match anymore. Remember the little trim and the edges of mud, and it's going to give that mud a little bit of strength as well. Bonding Boss also allows you to paint on top of any slick or shiny surfaces if your piece was not real wood, shiny surface, plastic, or metal. While we wait for that Bonding Boss to dry for 24 hours, let's tackle the feet on this project. So the plan is to try and get these feet as raw as possible in order to match them to the Birdseye maple. I want to have the feet be nice and light in color factor of wood so that they will kind of complement the drawers. I will apply citrus strip and then cover it in plastic and then come in with a sponge, a scratchy sponge, to get off as much of the finish as possible. I'm not the biggest fan of stripping wood. It's something I rarely do. Number one, it's messy. Number two, it always kind of turns out a little bit less well than you think it will, to be completely honest. You always think that you're going to apply some stripper and then grab your mineral spirits and all the wood is going to be naked super fast. It never ends up that way. So after I did use my mineral spirits to get as much of the finish off, I also sanded these feet too. Since the front of this dresser has that beautiful trim, I'm going to create a scene of a sky in the middle. I did paint the blue and white clouds on the Dixie Belle Paint page on Facebook and I believe on YouTube. So if you want to check that out, you totally can. It's just an ombre blend and I'll link a video here as well. I've done it many times before. Next up is using my gator hide to apply a moon. This moon has gold leaf. I'm going to let it get dry and then I will use my vacuum to suck off the excess and leave me with a gorgeous moonscape for my branches. Using a shop vac or a vacuum with a little brush like this to remove the excess parts of the gold leaf. Hot tip. It's the hot tip of the day because otherwise you will be finding this gold leaf all around your house for the next, week or so for sure. It tends to travel. So I'm going to create this little abstract moon or sun, whatever you like to think it's going to be. Art is totally subjective, but this is part of my sky base to come in and hand paint some branches onto my project. Again, I'm going to paint this in fast motion because nobody wants to sit here for an hour and watch me paint a tree branch. I mean, if you do, I actually have a video for it and I'll put it in the description below where you can learn step by step in slow motion process how to paint some really realistic tree branches. Using Dixie Belle's chalk mineral paint, I created these beautiful branches with a little bit of depth and dimension using my spatula to add highlights on the branches. So next up is going to be florals. I like to paint these kind of loose, drippy florals. They're a little bit abstract, but they are fun to paint, and being a little abstract is a lot easier than getting super detailed. So I'm going to use a bunch of Dixie Belle's chalk mineral paint in neutrals and some soft pinks to create blooms on the branches. I want this piece of furniture to be like functional art. I want you to be able to look at it and have all of the elements come together and just flow well. I feel like this has a little bit of an Asian feel, kind of more like cherry blossoms, but bigger. I'm not really sure how to explain it, but doing them this way without a lot of greenery really makes it look pretty. I love the lines, I love the blooms, and again, I do have a video for these as well, and I can pop that in the description as well. I use neutral tones with a tiny bit of pink to create these gorgeous blooms, keeping them loose, keeping them flowing, and then came in with a bit of green, some weeping willow to accent the florals with some buds and tiny leaves. It's starting to come together. I'm able to see how this is going to work. Seeing those panels on the top two drawers and the feet really helps me kind of see how everything will match. I wanted a neutral base, so I used burlap, cobblestone, and fluff, and I dabbled the color on in more of a random pattern, creating kind of a vintage book page feel. I just wanted to look aged but still soft to complement the florals. And I will only paint up to the edge of the trim because I'm going to be using gold leaf on that trim as well. So I painted on and stippled on this soft vintage book page feel to this dresser. I taped off my Birdseye maple so I wouldn't ruin it, and did the same thing to the edges of the drawers. In keeping with my neutral palette, I used Dixie Belle's Au Naturel VooDoo gel stain, which is water-based, to stain the feet, and then just very gently give a little bit of bleached out vibes to the Birdseye maple. Like very, very little amount of stain on the Birdseye maple. I wanted to frame in the artwork by using the gold leaf, so I'm using gator hide as my medium to adhere the gold leaf to my project. Gator hide is a good medium for this because it does tack up fairly quickly. You could also use the Stick With Me, which is another product by Dixie Belle that you can combine with Dixie Shine, but I wanted a little bit more full coverage with the gold leaf. And since the gator hide dries fairly quickly, I can apply all of this gold leaf and then push it down with a brush to make sure I'm getting it in around the edges, and then wait about 4 hours or so before I come in and use my vacuum to bring it back. After I do use my vacuum to remove any of the excess, I take a minute to fill in any of the empty areas, and I did have to fill in a couple more areas on the moon that I have on the front of the piece. We are almost getting there, almost done on this piece. It's taking a while to kind of do all of this step by step of this process, but honestly, the more that I did and the more time that I took to kind of plan this piece out, it all came together by itself. I really couldn't see the final look until I got to about this point, and I was super happy with it. I used the same hardware that I had originally to spray paint a nice bright gold, and then I also sealed the entire piece with Dixie Belle's clear wax. Since the paint is textured and stippled on, the clear wax will help that accentuate and seal it in. Now that we are done the base of the project, let's tackle those drawers because they were kind of yuck. So my trick for getting nice, clean, beautiful smelling drawers when they look like this is to combine equal parts of Butta, Big Mama's Butta, and gel stain. Now, when you pick a color gel stain to do this with, choose one a little bit darker than what's on your project. I used espresso. So when you combine Butta and your gel stain, it makes this beautiful colored salve. This salve will then go in and absorb into the wood, hiding all of those little marks and water stains and wear and tear that's on the interior of the drawers, because they're not really dirty. I've cleaned them already with White Lightning. They just had age and stains and wear and tear. But look at that beautiful shiny finish that smells super yummy on the inside of your drawers. I've had a couple people ask me about dry time for this. Yes, this is an oil-based product being gel stain, but when you cut it with the Big Mama's butter, it's not as thick, so it really sucks into the wood well. This is old, kind of dried out wood, remember? So I actually test this before I bring my projects to the store. It dries 100% completely in about 24 hours, and it smells really good. I'm not kidding. I like to use flannel or orange Big Mama's butter, but this is a great way for you to refresh your drawers without having to reline them. Some of the final details that are not shown in this video is a little bit of brown wax around the edges, a touch of some gold with some gold gilding wax to add a little bit of shine, and tiny little flicks of paint. I like little flicks and splatters of white paint on my projects. I feel like it just gives it a more vintage feel. And I'm not gonna lie when I say that this piece might be my most favorite piece of 2024. What a great way to end the year. That beautiful hand painting, gorgeous Birdseye maple, 100% original hardware. This piece just flows. I feel like this neutral scape with that soft blue background and hand painted florals really just made this piece. It's going to be hard to take it to the booth to sell, but I think that this piece will make somebody very, very happy. What do you think of this gorgeous makeover? Thanks for joining me, and I'll see you again in 2025.